Ruthless Mafia boss marries a poor obese waitress as a cruel bet, then she does something that leaves him speechless. His hand wrapped around my throat before I could breathe. Not squeezing, not yet, just there, warm and possessive, his thumb pressed against the flutter of my pulse. Dante's eyes were molten amber, fury and hunger twisted so tight I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Who was he? His voice was silk wrapped around a blade. We stood in the marble entryway of his penthouse, 43 stories above Chicago, and I could feel the danger radiating off him like heat from pavement in August. He'd seen me talking to the man in the lobby. Just talking. The doorman's nephew, harmless conversation about the weather. But Dante didn't do harmless. A stranger, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was trying to break through my ribs. Someone who smiled at me. His grip tightened fractionally. Not pain. Promise. You're my wife. For 3 more months. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. Contract, remember? Or are you forgetting this was all just a bet? Something cracked in his expression, rage giving way to something rawer, more desperate. His forehead dropped to mine, his breath uneven against my lips. It stopped being a bet the moment you looked at me like I was more than a monster, he whispered, and I hated how those words made my chest ache. You're mine, Petra. And I don't share. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you married me as a joke. His mouth crashed against mine. Not a kiss, a claim, and I kissed him back just as fiercely because I was just as ruined as he was. But let me tell you how we got here. How a ruthless mafia boss chose me, specifically, deliberately, because I was poor, desperate, and perfectly vulnerable. How he researched every corner of my life, cataloged my weaknesses, and made me fall in love with him while knowing it was all a game. And how I discovered the truth and made him pay in ways that brought him to his knees. This is a story about monsters and the women who see them clearly and love them anyway. About bets that become vows and contracts that turn into forevers. If you crave dark romance that burns, hit subscribe and join Rosalie's world. Because what happens next? You won't see it coming. The smell of cigar smoke and aged whiskey hung thick in the private room of Salvatore's, threading through air that tasted like power and privilege. I'd worked at this restaurant for 3 years, long enough to recognize the men who gathered in these back rooms. The ones in $12,000 suits with platinum watches and eyes that saw people as transactions. Dante Russo sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. At 34, he controlled half the underground operations in Chicago, and everyone in that room knew it. His Patek Philippe caught the amber light from the crystal chandelier above, $340,000 worth of machinery on his wrist, more than I'd make in 15 years. Dark hair cut with military precision. Jawline sharp enough to cut glass. A scar through his left eyebrow that somehow made him more devastating rather than less. I'd served him before. He'd never once looked at me. You're getting soft, Russo, his cousin Nico said, smoke curling from his lips like a dragon testing its fire. When's the last time you did something unpredictable? Dante's fingers drummed once against the mahogany table, a sound like a gavel, final and absolute. I don't need to prove anything to you. Then prove it to yourself. Nico leaned forward, gold rings glinting on fingers that had broken bones and signed death warrants. I bet you $500,000 you won't marry the next woman who walks through that door. And stay married 6 months. The room went silent except for the clink of ice in crystal glasses. In their world, $500,000 wasn't pocket change, but it wasn't life-changing either. It was the principle, the challenge, the game. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I saw it from the corner of my eye as I balanced the tray of drinks, trying to be invisible the way good servers always are. His amber eyes flicked to the door, calculating, always 3 moves ahead. Any woman? His voice was smooth as the whiskey in his glass and twice as dangerous. Any woman. 6 months minimum. You back out early, you pay double. The universe held its breath. Deal. That's when I pushed through the door. My polyester uniform stretched across curves that defied every fashion magazine, every billboard, every standard of beauty these men valued. The fabric was pilling at the seams. I'd worn it for 2 years, because new ones cost $47 and I needed that money for rent. My name tag read Petra in fading letters. They have nearly rubbed away from 3 years of washing. I kept my eyes down, moving efficiently between chairs. Sensible shoes worn at the heels. No makeup because what was the point? Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail with an elastic that had cost 99 cents for a pack of 20. I was nobody. Invisible.
Perfect. You.
Dante's voice cut through the smoke and silence. Stay. My hand trembled slightly as I set down the last glass. Glenfiddich, neat, for the man on his left. I'd felt their eyes on me, the weight of male attention that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with assessment. Like I was livestock at auction. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming to run. Yes, sir? Up close, he was devastating. Cheekbones that could have been carved by Michelangelo. Eyes the color of burnt amber with flecks of gold that caught the light when he tilted his head. The scar bisecting his left eyebrow. I'd heard whispers it was from a knife fight when he was 19, the night he killed his first man. I hated that I noticed how beautiful he was. What's your full name? Not a question. A demand. Petra Volkov. My voice came out steadier than I felt. You work here often? 6 nights a week. Because I need the money. Because my brother's medical bills are drowning me. Because I'm $14,700 in debt and sinking. He studied me like I was a contract he was considering. His gaze traveled over my face, my body, clinical and cold. No desire, just calculation. Somehow that was worse. How much do you make in a year? The question was designed to humiliate, to put me in my place, to remind me exactly how far beneath him I stood. I lifted my chin. $23,000. Plus tips. I'll give you $100,000 to marry me. He said it like he was ordering dinner. 6 months. After that, you walk away. We never see each other again. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was also 3 years of rent, my brother Alexei's medical bills, a way out of the kitchen that smelled like fryer grease and crushed dreams. $150,000. The words left my mouth before my brain caught up. Half up front. Nico laughed. Sharp and cruel, the sound of a man who enjoyed watching people squirm. Several others joined in. But Dante's expression didn't change. Something flickered in his eyes though. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Done. 72 hours later, I stood in a courthouse that smelled of industrial cleaner and the defeated dreams of every couple who'd ever signed papers here. I wore a dress from Target, $34.99, navy blue, because white felt like a mockery of what this was. Dante wore a suit that probably cost more than my car, charcoal gray with a burgundy tie that matched the wine he'd been drinking when he had someone killed last week. I didn't know that yet, but I would. The judge droned through vows I didn't hear. My hand was cold in Dante's, my fingers trembling despite the defiance I was trying to project. His hands were warm, calloused in a way that said he'd built his empire with more than just words. There was a scar across his right knuckles that looked recent. When he slid the ring onto my finger, simple gold band, $200 at most, nothing special, my breath hitched. It was real. This was real. I was marrying a stranger for money, and somehow the weight of that cheap ring felt heavier than anything I'd ever worn. You may kiss the bride. Dante leaned in, his cologne hitting me first, something dark with notes of cedar and gunpowder, probably $400 an ounce. His lips brushed mine for exactly 1.2 seconds. I counted. He tasted like mint and danger, and when he pulled back, something in his eyes looked almost like disappointment before he shuddered it away. My first thought, I can survive this. My second thought, I'm lying to myself. The check for $75,000 cleared my bank account that afternoon. I stared at my phone screen, at numbers I'd never seen in my account before, and felt something twist in my chest. Relief.
Shame.
Hope.
Fear.
All of it tangled together until I couldn't breathe. I paid off Alexei's medical bills first, $8,900 to keep him in treatment, to keep him alive. Then my credit cards, $3,200. Student loans from the 2 semesters I'd managed before dropping out, $2,100. Back rent I owed my landlord, $500. What remained? $60,300, and 6 months of my life sold to a man who looked at me like I was a problem to solve. The penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan from 43 stories up, all steel and glass and cold masculine minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting, Chicago sprawling beneath us, millions of lights, millions of lives, and I was suspended above all of it in a gilded cage. Petra stood in the center of the living room, my single duffel bag at my feet, and felt like an imposter in a museum. Everything was sharp edges and clean lines. Black leather sofa that probably cost $15,000. Abstract art on the walls that I didn't understand but knew was expensive. Kitchen with appliances that looked like they'd never been used. Wolf range, sub-zero refrigerator, marble countertops, so pristine they might as well have been roped off. "Your room is down the hall," Dante said, already turning toward his office. He'd loosened his tie, but otherwise looked as controlled as he had at the courthouse. "Second door, on the right." "Stay out of my way. We'll get through this fine." He didn't wait for a response. Just walked away, his footsteps silent on the hardwood, and closed his office door with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. I stood there for 3 full minutes, listening to the silence. Then I picked up my duffel bag and found my room. It was bigger than my entire apartment had been. King-size bed with white linens that probably had a thread count higher than my rent. And soot bathroom with a shower that had 6 different heads and controls I didn't understand. Walk-in closet that echoed when I stepped inside because I owned 7 outfits total, and they barely took up 3 feet of rack space. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the weight of what I'd done settle over me like a blanket made of lead. 6 months. I could survive 6 months of anything. The first week, we were ghosts haunting the same space. Dante left before dawn. I'd hear his alarm at 5:30 a.m. The sound of the shower, his footsteps passing my door at exactly 5:47. He returned after midnight most nights, sometimes later. I'd lie awake in my too-big bed and listen for the sound of his key in the lock, hating that I was listening at all. I explored the penthouse carefully during the day, touching nothing I didn't need to touch. The refrigerator was mostly empty except for a bottle of Grey Goose and several containers of takeout that were growing mold. The kitchen cabinets held expensive glassware and nothing else. This was a showroom, not a home. A place to display wealth, not live life. But I noticed things. His coffee routine, glimpsed on the rare mornings our schedules overlapped. Black coffee, always. 2 espresso shots pulled from a machine that probably cost more than a used car. No sugar, no cream. He drank it standing at the counter, always reading something on his phone, never sitting. Always moving, always working, never still. He didn't cook. Probably never had. The Wolf range was a $20,000 sculpture. He read philosophy books in Italian. I found them stacked on the side table in the living room, dog-eared and annotated in tight handwriting. Machiavelli.
Dante.
Marcus Aurelius. He took calls at odd hours in rapid Italian, his voice dropping to dangerous registers that made my stomach tighten even though I couldn't understand the words. He was left-handed but wore his watch on his left wrist anyway. Unusual, deliberate, like he'd trained himself to overcome the discomfort. I was learning him whether I wanted to or not. Day 8, everything shifted. I woke early, 6:15 a.m., and found Dante in the kitchen staring at the espresso machine with an expression of barely contained violence. He was already dressed for the day, 3-piece suit in navy, no tie yet, collar unbuttoned to reveal the hollow of his throat. His hair was damp from the shower. "It's broken," he said flatly when he noticed me in the doorway. I moved past him, close enough to catch the scent of his shower. Something clean and sharp, soap and skin without the cologne yet. The machine wasn't broken. The filter was clogged because he'd never cleaned it, grounds packed so tight no water could pass through. I didn't say anything. Just opened the machine, removed the filter, rinsed it under hot water until the water ran clear, reassembled everything in 45 seconds flat. Try now.
He did.
It worked. Perfect crema, rich and dark. He stared at the cup for a moment, then at me. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, that I'd fixed his problem without making him feel stupid for not knowing how. Thank you, he said quietly. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. You know how to use this? I was a barista before I was a server. 3 years at a coffee shop on Madison. Why'd you leave? Tips were better at Salvatore's. And I needed every extra dollar to keep my brother alive. He nodded slowly, processing this information, filing it away. Then, make yourself coffee. Whatever you want. This is your home too. For 6 months, I thought. This is a rental, not a home. But I said, okay. It was the first real conversation we'd had since the courthouse. Day 12. I was reading in the living room when Dante came home early, 8:47 p.m., hours before his usual time. I'd curled up on the leather sofa with a worn paperback from the library, a thriller about a woman who disappeared and the husband who might have killed her. My 3rd time reading it. He stopped in the doorway, loosening his tie, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. I'd been here 12 days, and I'd never seen him look tired. He was always controlled, always composed, always 3 steps ahead. But tonight he looked human. You've read that before, he said. I looked up, surprised he'd noticed, surprised he'd remembered. 3rd time. Why? I marked my place with a grocery receipt, $43.67 for a week of groceries. I'd been cooking for myself because eating out in his neighborhood cost more than I'd made in a day at Salvatore's. Sometimes you see things differently when you know how it ends, I said. He crossed to the bar, poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler, Macallan 18, $300 a bottle. The silence stretched between us, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. Just there. My cousin thinks you're playing me, he said finally, his back still to me. That you're after something more than the money. Your cousin sounds paranoid.
He's right to be.
In my world, everyone wants something. I closed the book completely, setting it aside. What do you want, Dante? His name on my lips. It was the first time I'd said it. The sound seemed to hit him physically. I watched his shoulders tense, watched his hand tighten fractionally around the glass. He turned to face me, and the expression in his eyes was complicated. Guarded. Curious. Something else I couldn't name. I want you to stop looking at me like I'm going to hurt you. The honesty startled me. I'd expected deflection, maybe cruelty, not truth. Are you? I asked quietly. Going to hurt me? Not physically, but every other way? His jaw clenched. Probably. I should have been afraid. Should have recognized the warning for what it was. Instead, I felt something else, respect, maybe for not lying to me, for telling me exactly what kind of man he was. At least you're honest about it, I said. Does that make it better or worse? I don't know yet. He studied me for a long moment, then drained his whiskey in one swallow. You're not what I expected. Disappointed. Confused.
About what?
How someone so smart ended up desperate enough to marry a stranger for money. The words could have been cruel, but his tone was genuinely curious. Like he actually wanted to understand. My brother has leukemia, I heard myself say. I hadn't planned to tell him. Hadn't planned to give him any pieces of myself that mattered. He's 22. He was in remission, but it came back. The treatment costs $3,400 a month, and insurance covers about half. I've been working 6 nights a week for 2 years trying to keep him alive, and I was losing. So when you offered me money to play pretend for 6 months, I met his eyes. That wasn't desperation. That was survival. Something cracked in his expression, the control slipping just enough for me to see pain underneath. Old pain. Deep pain. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "About your brother." "Don't be sorry. Just don't make me regret this." His phone rang then. A specific ringtone, sharp and urgent. His entire body went rigid, the exhaustion burning away in an instant, replaced by something cold and lethal. He answered in rapid Italian, his voice dropping to registers that made my stomach clench. I didn't speak Italian, but I understood tone. I understood danger. When he hung up, he was already moving toward the door. "I have to go." He grabbed his jacket from where he'd tossed it over a chair. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Not the doorman, not a delivery person, not anyone. Understand?" "Dante, what?" "Understand." His eyes were hard, brooking no argument. "Yes." He left without another word, and suddenly the penthouse felt enormous and empty, and I understood with crystal clarity that I'd married into something far more dangerous than I'd realized. I locked the door, triple-checked it. Then I went to the kitchen and pulled the biggest knife from the block, just in case. I didn't sleep that night. He returned at dawn with blood on his knuckles. I was awake, curled in the armchair facing the door, the knife hidden under the cushion because I wasn't stupid enough to hold it where he could see. When his key turned in the lock at 6:23 a.m., I was ready to run or fight or both. But when he walked in, I saw exhaustion and something darker, violence, barely contained, still humming under his skin like electricity. "You should be asleep," he said flatly, not meeting my eyes. "So should you." He moved to walk past me, heading for his room, for distance, for the walls he kept between himself and everyone else. But I stood, blocking his path. "Let me see your hands." "It's nothing, Dante." I kept my voice firm. "Let me see." He stared at me for a long moment, some internal battle playing out behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he extended his right hand. His knuckles were split open, two of them, blood dried dark against his skin. Bruising was already forming, purple-black spreading across the ridge of his hawn. These weren't defensive wounds. These were the knuckles of someone who'd hit something, or someone, hard and repeatedly. I took his hand carefully, my fingers gentle on his wrist, and led him to the kitchen. He followed without protest, which scared me more than the blood did. This man didn't follow anyone. I ran warm water in the sink, tested the temperature, then guided his hand under the stream. He stood silent as I cleaned the wounds, using a clean dishcloth to wipe away the dried blood with gentle, efficient movements. I'd done this before, patched up my brother after fights at school, after the cancer made him angry and reckless. Dante watched my face the whole time. I could feel the weight of his stare, but I kept my eyes on his hand, on the task, on something concrete I could fix. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Because you're hurt. I've had worse." "That doesn't mean you deserve it." I dried his hand carefully, found the first aid kit under the sink, and used, still in its packaging, an applied antibiotic ointment with careful precision. His left hand came up catching my wrist. Not hard. Just there. Making me look at him. "You should be afraid of me," he said, and there was something desperate in his voice, like he needed me to be afraid, needed the distance fear would create. "I know," I whispered. "But I'm not." "Why not?" "Because I've been invisible my whole life." The words came from somewhere deep and true. Every man who's ever looked at me has looked through me. Like I'm furniture. Like I don't exist.
But you see me, Dante.
And I see you too. Not the monster everyone's afraid of. You. The words broke something in him. He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine, his breath uneven and warm against my lips. I could feel him trembling. This dangerous man, this killer, shaking like he was coming apart. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "What?" "I wasn't supposed to want you to stay." My heart stopped, restarted, kicked against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Dante." He kissed me. Not like the courthouse. This was heat and hunger and desperation, his hand cupping my jaw, his injured hand settling on my waist. I gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound, deepening the kiss, backing me against the counter until I felt marble cool against my spine. I should stop this. Should remember this was temporary, transactional, a bet that made me a punchline. But when his hands found my waist, spanning the width of me without hesitation or shame, I pressed closer instead. His mouth moved to my neck, and I felt his teeth scrape against my pulse point, gentle enough to make me shiver, hard enough to make me gasp his name. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against my skin, his voice wrecked. Every rational thought in my head said stop. Every survival instinct said run. "Don't you dare," I whispered. He lifted me onto the counter like I weighed nothing, stepping between my legs, his hands sliding up my thighs. I felt the heat of him through layers of fabric, felt his heart racing as fast as mine, felt his control fracturing with every breath. Petra. My name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse. I pulled his mouth back to mine, kissing him with everything I'd been holding back for 12 days. My hands found the buttons of his shirt, fumbling, desperate. His hands were everywhere, my waist, my back, tangling in my hair. The world narrowed to his touch, his taste, the sound of my name in his mouth. When he carried me to his bedroom, our bedroom, now, I wrapped my legs around his waist and let myself fall into the kind of dangerous I'd promised myself I'd avoid. What happened next changed everything. I woke to sunlight cutting sharp lines across unfamiliar sheets. Dante's bed. I was in Dante's bed. The memory of the night rushed back in waves. His hands, his mouth, the way he'd whispered my name like I was something sacred instead of a transaction. The way I'd fallen apart in his arms and felt, for the first time in my life, beautiful. I reached for him, but found only cold sheets. A note on his pillow, written in tight, controlled handwriting. Had to handle something. Back tonight.
D.
I smiled despite myself, running my fingers over the paper. Then I noticed the time on the bedside clock, 11:47 a.m. I'd slept through my alarm, through the morning, lost in exhaustion, and something that felt dangerously like contentment. My body ached in ways that made me blush, remembering. I stretched, feeling deliciously used, and caught sight of myself in the mirror across the room. I looked different.
Softer. Happy.
This is dangerous, I thought. This is so dangerous. But I couldn't stop smiling. I showered in his bathroom, our bathroom, using a soap that smelled like cedar and something darker. Getting dressed in the clothes I'd scattered across his floor last night. Making the bed we'd wrecked together. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. I headed for the kitchen, planning to make breakfast, maybe start a grocery list. We were out of eggs. I'd noticed yesterday. I'd have to go into his office to find paper. The office. The one room I'd never entered, never even peeked into. His private space, his sanctuary, the place where he conducted business I definitely didn't want to know about. But I just needed paper. A notepad. Something to write a grocery list on. I hesitated outside the door for 30 seconds, feeling ridiculous. We'd spent the night tangled in each other. Surely I could borrow a piece of paper. I opened the door. His office was obsessively organized. Massive desk with nothing out of place, files arranged by color-coded tabs, expensive leather chair, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal texts and what I assumed were business records. A single folder sat slightly askew on the desk, like someone had left in a hurry.
My name was on the tab.
My heart stopped. I shouldn't look. Should walk away, find paper somewhere else, respect his privacy the way he'd respected my boundaries last night when he'd asked 3 times if I was sure, if this was what I wanted. But my name was on that folder. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, photographs.
Dozens of them.
Me serving tables at Salvatore's, taken from across the room with a telephoto lens. Me walking to work, my head down, earbuds in. Me leaving my apartment building, the old one, the one I'd lived in before this. Me at the grocery store. Me at the hospital visiting Alexei. Surveillance photos. Professional. Extensive. Underneath. A background check. Employment history going back 7 years. Credit report showing every dollar I owed. Medical records for Alexei. How did he get those? Bank statements. Rental history. And underneath it all, a report dated 3 weeks before Nico had made that bet in Salvatore's. My hands shook so hard the papers rattled. Subject: Petra Volkov. Age: 28. Occupation: server, Salvatore's restaurant. Annual income: $23,000 plus tips. Estimated $4,200. Debt: $14,700. Medical, credit cards, student loans. Family: brother Alexei Volkov, 22, leukemia patient. Vulnerability assessment: high. Recommendation: suitable for purpose. Subject has significant financial pressure, family obligation, and limited options. Unlikely to refuse substantial monetary offer. Low social connections equals minimal complications. Physical appearance ensures no emotional attachment risk. Recommendation: proceed. The folder slipped from my numb fingers, papers scattering across the hardwood floor like evidence at a crime scene. He'd researched me, chosen me, before the bet, before Nico had said a word. This wasn't random chance. This wasn't serendipity. This was premeditated manipulation. He'd selected me specifically because I was desperate, because I was fat enough that he thought he'd never want me, because I was poor and powerless and perfect to use. The bet had been staged. The whole thing. Nico had probably been in on it, or maybe Dante had orchestrated it, knowing his cousin's weaknesses, knowing exactly how to make it seem spontaneous. And I'd fallen for it. Fallen for him. Last night. This morning. The way he'd touched me like I mattered. All of it was a lie. The sound of a key in the lock made me freeze. Petra? Dante's voice, calling from the entryway. You awake? I couldn't move.
Couldn't breathe.
I stood in the center of his office, surrounded by evidence of my own stupidity, and felt something inside me crack clean through. Footsteps approaching.
Fast.
He'd heard something in my silence. He appeared in the doorway and stopped dead. Saw me. Saw the folder. Saw the papers scattered like bones across his floor. For one heartbeat, his expression was completely unguarded, and what I saw there was guilt. Pure, devastating guilt. Then his mask slammed back into place. Petra, he stepped forward, hands raised like I was a spooked animal. You picked me. My voice sounded distant, strange. Before the bet. Before any of it. You already knew everything about me. His jaw clenched. Let me explain. You researched my debt. My brother's cancer. You knew exactly how desperate I was. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The bet was fake. You planned all of this. He didn't deny it. Didn't insult me with lies. Yes. The word hung in the air between us like smoke after a gunshot.
Yes.
Not an excuse. Not a justification. Just brutal, devastating honesty. Why? The question came out broken, barely a whisper. Dante stood in the doorway of his office, 5 feet away, but it might as well have been miles. His expression was carved from stone, but his hands, I noticed his hands were trembling. Because I needed a wife who wouldn't have expectations, he said, his voice flat and controlled in a way that made it worse. Who wouldn't be connected to my world. Who would be easy to. To what? I heard my voice rising. Control? Manipulate? Both. He didn't flinch from the truth. And discard. When the 6 months were over. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I grabbed the edge of his desk, my knuckles going white. And last night? This morning? The way you touched me, the things you said, was that part of the plan too?
No.
He took a step forward, and I took a step back. Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, maybe, that I was retreating from him. Petra, that was... Don't. I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't you dare tell me that was real when everything else was a lie. It wasn't all a lie. Yes, it was. The scream tore out of me, raw and jagged. You researched me like I was a business acquisition. You cataloged my debts, my brother's illness, every vulnerability I had, and you used them. You looked at me and saw someone so desperate, so pathetic, that I'd be easy to control. That's not. Physical appearance ensures no emotional attachment risk. I quoted from memory. The words burned into my brain. That's what the report said. You chose me because you thought you'd never actually want me. Because I'm fat and poor and invisible, and that made me perfect for your sick game. He flinched like I'd hit him. Petra, get out. His eyes widened. This is my home. Then I'll leave. I moved toward the door, but he stepped into my path. You can't. The contract. Something inside me snapped. Fuck your contract. I shoved past him, my shoulder hitting his chest, and he let me go. I made it 3 steps before his voice stopped me. You leave now, you get nothing. I turned slowly, feeling ice spread through my chest where warmth had been just hours ago. What? His expression was cold now, remote. The man I'd married in the courthouse instead of the one who'd whispered my name like a prayer last night. The contract specifies 6 months. You leave before that, you breach the agreement. You get nothing. Not the second payment. Nothing. You're threatening me. I'm reminding you of reality. He crossed his arms, and I saw the monster everyone else saw when they looked at Dante Russo. Your brother needs treatment. You're $14,700 in debt, remember? I know because I fucking researched you. You need this money, Petra. So think very carefully about what you're about to do. The cruelty in his voice was designed to hurt, and it worked. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall.
Refuse to give him that.
You're right, I said quietly. I do need the money, so I'll stay. I'll finish your contract, play my part, take your blood money. I saw something crack in his expression. Hope, maybe, that I was relenting. But you don't get to touch me again. I continued, my voice hardening. You don't get to look at me like I matter. You don't get to pretend that what happened last night meant anything. We'll finish this contract exactly like you always intended, as strangers. Business associates. Nothing more. I walked to my room, the one I should have stayed in from the beginning, and locked the door. I heard him standing outside for 17 minutes. I counted. He didn't knock.
Didn't speak.
Finally, his footsteps retreated, and I heard his office door close. Only then did I let myself cry. 3 weeks. 21 days of living as ghosts in the same space. Dante left before I woke. Came home after I slept. When our schedules accidentally overlapped, we moved around each other like dancers who knew the choreography too well. No touching, no eye contact, no acknowledgement beyond the bare minimum civility. I cooked. He worked. We existed in parallel lines that would never intersect again. But I felt him watching me sometimes, when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch, hungry and desperate and full of regret. I ignored it. Ignored him. Ignored the way my heart still kicked when I heard his key in the lock at night. He tried once to apologize. I was in the kitchen on day 19 making bread because kneading dough gave my hands something to do besides shake. He came home early, 7:13 p.m., and found me elbow deep in flour. Petra. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much. We need to talk. No, we don't. What I did. I don't want to hear it. Just let me explain. I turned on him, my hands still covered in flour, and something in my expression made him step back. Explain what, Dante? That you saw a desperate fat girl and thought she'd be easy to use? That you played me perfectly? Congratulations. You won. Again. You always win, don't you? It's not like that. Then what's it like? I was shaking now, rage and pain tangled together. Because from where I'm standing, I'm just another transaction. Another deal you closed. You researched me, manipulated me, made me fall for you while knowing it was all a game. I fell too. The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. You think I planned that? You think I wanted to? He stopped, his hands curling into fists. Wanted to what? To need you. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. To wake up reaching for you. To spend every meeting thinking about the way you laugh. To feel like I can finally breathe when I hear your key in the lock at night. My heart was trying to break through my ribs. Stop. It wasn't supposed to be real, Petra. But it is. You're real. This is real. And I. Stop. I stepped back, putting the counter between us like a barricade. You don't get to do this. You don't get to manipulate me, betray me, and then expect me to forgive you because you've caught feelings. That's not how this works. I know. No, you don't know. You think you can control everything. You think you can play games with people's lives and then fix it with pretty words when it suits you. But I'm not one of your business deals, Dante. I'm a person. And you broke me. The devastation in his eyes should have felt like victory. Instead, it just made the ache in my chest worse. I know I did, he said quietly, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. I turned back to my bread, my hands shaking so hard I could barely knead the dough. You have 11 weeks left. Then you never have to think about me again. I heard him leave, heard his office door close. That night, I pressed my ear against my bedroom door at 2:47 a.m. and heard him standing in the hallway outside. Neither of us knocked. Neither of us spoke. In the morning, he was gone before sunrise. The change came from an unexpected source. Saturday morning, week 4. I was baking again, cookies this time because the physical act of measuring and mixing kept my hands busy and my mind from spiraling. The counter was covered in cooling racks, chocolate chip and oatmeal raisin, and snickerdoodles I'd never eat. The doorbell rang. I froze. Dante had said never to open the door for anyone. But the security camera showed a woman, early 30s, designer clothes but warm eyes, holding a coffee carrier from the shop on the corner. She pressed the intercom. I know you're in there, Petra. I'm Dante's sister Gabriella. I brought coffee, and I'm not leaving until we talk, so you might as well let me in before this gets awkward for both of us. Dante's sister. I weighed my options for 30 seconds, then buzzed her up. She breezed in like she owned the place. Which, given the family resemblance, she probably could. Same dark hair, same golden eyes, same bone structure that made strangers stare. But where Dante was all sharp edges and controlled danger, Gabriella was warmth and direct honesty. You must be the wife, she said, setting the coffee on the counter and immediately stealing a cookie.
Good.
My brother's been acting like a lovesick teenager, and I needed to see the woman who's got him so twisted up. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Also, these are incredible. She took another cookie. Okay, here's the thing. I'm going to be brutally honest because that's who I am, and my brother's an idiot, so someone needs to intervene. Gabriella?
Gabby.
And before you defend him or throw me out, just know that I'm on your side. Whatever he did, and knowing Dante it was something controlling and stupid and perfectly planned to blow up in his face, you're probably right to be furious. Despite everything, I felt my lips twitch. Almost a smile. The first in 3 weeks.
She caught it.
There she is. I knew you couldn't be as broken as Dante looks. How does he look? I heard myself ask. Like someone reached into his chest and ripped out his heart. He's not sleeping. Barely eating. He snapped at 3 separate capos this week, which is how I knew something was seriously wrong because Dante never loses control. She studied me with those sharp golden eyes.
So,
what happened? Maybe it was the 3 weeks of holding everything in. Maybe it was that she seemed genuinely concerned instead of calculating. Maybe I just needed someone to talk to who wasn't the reflection in my mirror. I told her everything. The research. The manipulation. The report recommending me because I was vulnerable and unattractive enough that he wouldn't get emotionally attached. The way I'd fallen for him anyway. The devastating betrayal of finding the folder. Gabby listened without interrupting, stealing cookies periodically, her expression darkening as the story unfolded. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, yeah, that's fucked up. Classic Dante, honestly. I laughed, a broken, bitter sound. That's your response? I'm not defending him. What he did was manipulative and cruel, and exactly the kind of thing he spent his whole life doing, because control is the only thing that makes him feel safe.
She met my eyes.
But can I tell you something? Something that might not excuse what he did, but might explain it. I don't. My brother's been in love exactly once before.
He was 22.
She was a civilian, a teacher, sweet and innocent, and everything good in the world. He thought he could protect her from his world, keep her separate and safe. Something cold settled in my stomach. What happened? Rival family found her. They sent her back to him in pieces. Gabby's voice was flat, emotionless in a way that meant the emotion was too big to show. He found the box. He ID'd the body. And something in him broke that day. I couldn't breathe. After that, he swore he'd never let anyone close again. Too dangerous. Everyone he loved became a target. So he built walls and played games and kept everything transactional because transactions can't hurt you. She took another cookie, not eating it, just holding it. And then you walked through that door, and I bet he told himself it was just business. Just a bet. Just 6 months. He could control it. But he researched me before. Because he's terrified of losing control. So he researches, he plans, he stacks the deck in his favor. It's not right, Petra. But it's how he survives.
She finally looked at me again.
But here's what he didn't plan for. Actually falling for you. And I've known my brother my entire life. I've never, and I mean never, seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. How does he look at me? Like you're the sun, and he's been freezing his whole life. Like you're the only real thing in his world of lies. She set down the cookie. Look, if you're looking for a perfect man, you're in the wrong family. Russos are fucked up and controlling, and we handle emotions like other people handle live grenades. But if you want to know if what he feels is real, it's real. Real enough that it scares the shit out of him. I press my hands against the counter, feeling flour dust my palms. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. But the question isn't whether he deserves forgiveness. The question is whether you still want him despite knowing exactly who he is. After Gabby left, I sat alone with cooling cookies and cold coffee and a question I didn't know how to answer. If you're still with me, drop a like and let me know you're here. Because what happens next, it changes everything. 3 days later, at 3:17 a.m., I stood in Dante's office doorway, wearing one of his shirts I'd stolen from the laundry. He was at his desk, paperwork spread around him, reading glasses perched on his nose, making him look younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He looked up when I appeared, and the naked hope in his eyes nearly broke me. Petra, I need you to answer one question, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. And I need the truth, not the tactical truth. Not the answer you think I want, the real truth. Anything. When you touch me, when you kiss me, is that real? Or is it part of the game? He stood slowly, removing his glasses with shaking hands. It's the only real thing in my entire life. How do I know you're not lying? You don't. He rounded the desk but stopped 3 feet away, giving me space. But I'll spend every day proving it to you if you let me. I'll be transparent about everything. My business, my past, my fuck-ups. I'll give you access to every account, every file, every secret I've kept. I'll earn your trust back even if it takes years. I'm not going to forgive you, I said and watched him flinch. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was unforgivable. I know, but I took a breath. I'm willing to see if you can earn it back. If you can prove that you've changed, that you're more than the monster you think you are. The hope in his eyes was almost painful to witness. What do you need from me?
Truth.
No more secrets. No more manipulation. You want me to stay, you do it honestly. Done. And I need to meet them. His brows furrowed. Meet who? The families you hurt. The people who suffered because of your business, your decisions, your ruthlessness. I stepped closer. I need to see you make it right. Or, at least try to. I watched him process this, saw the flash of resistance before he controlled it. This would cost him pride, power, the invulnerability he'd built his reputation on. Okay, he said finally. I'll set it up. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Petra. I looked back. I'm sorry. His voice was raw, stripped of all defenses. For all of it, you deserved better than what I did. Better than me. Yes, I agreed. I did. Now you get to prove you can be better. The next 8 weeks were transformative. Dante kept his word. He compiled a list of families his business dealings had affected over the years, people who'd lost jobs when he bought and gutted companies, children whose parents had died in territorial disputes, businesses crushed when he'd expanded his territory. The first meeting was on a Tuesday. We drove to a modest neighborhood on the south side, to a small house with peeling paint and a chain-link fence. An older man answered the door. Mid-50s, work-worn hands, eyes that hardened when he saw Dante. Mr. Morrison, Dante said, his voice stripped of its usual command. My name is Dante Russo. 8 years ago, I bought the manufacturing plant where you worked and closed it to develop the land. You lost your job, your pension, I know who you are. Morrison's voice was cold. What the hell are you doing at my house? I'm here to apologize. And to offer compensation. Morrison laughed, bitter and sharp. Money doesn't bring back 8 years.
No.
It doesn't. But I'd like to help rebuild what I destroyed. Dante handed him a folder. Job placement assistance. Full pension restoration. Or, if you prefer, a settlement of $175,000. I watched Morrison's hands shake as he opened the folder. Watched his wife appear behind him, her expression wary. Watched their teenage daughter peek around the corner, curious. Why now? Morrison asked. Why after 8 years? Dante glanced at me, then back to Morrison. Because someone made me see the people behind the transactions. And I'm trying to be someone she can be proud of. Morrison studied us both for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. You better come in. We sat in their living room for 2 hours. Morrison's wife made coffee. Their daughter asked questions about what had happened, why her father had been so angry for so long. Dante answered every question with brutal honesty, accepting blame, never deflecting. When we left, Morrison shook Dante's hand. It was a start. The second meeting was harder. A widow named Teresa Chen, whose husband had been killed 3 years ago in crossfire from a fight Dante's men had started. She lived in a small apartment in Pilsen, surrounded by photographs of the man she'd lost. She didn't let us inside. She stood in the doorway and yelled at Dante for 47 minutes straight. She called him a murderer, a monster, a demon who destroyed families for profit. She told him about finding out her husband was dead, about their daughter asking when daddy was coming home, about working 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Dante stood there and took it. Never defended himself. Never interrupted. Just listened with his shoulders bowed under the weight of her grief. When she finally stopped, hoarse and crying, he spoke. You're right about everything. I can't bring him back. I can't give your daughter her father. But I can make sure you never have to work 3 jobs again. He handed her an envelope. This account has $250,000 in it. For your daughter's education, for your home, for whatever you need. It doesn't make it right. Nothing can. But it's what I can offer. She threw the envelope at his feet. We left it on her doorstep and drove home in silence. 2 days later, the envelope was gone from her doorstep. 3 days after that, she called the number Dante had left. She still hated him, but she'd use the money for her daughter. I watched Dante hang up the phone, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw him cry. Meeting after meeting. Week after week. A kid named Jerome, whose medical bills from a fight Dante's men started had bankrupted his family. $87,000 check written, college fund established. A woman whose small bakery Dante had forced out of business. New location lease paid for 3 years, equipment upgraded. A family whose son had worked for Dante and disappeared. Dante found the body, arranged burial, set up a trust fund for the younger siblings. He showed up to every meeting, took every insult, accepted every ounce of blame. He never made excuses, never tried to justify his actions, just tried to help in whatever way they'd let him. I watched him transform, not into someone soft, Dante would never be soft, but into someone accountable. Someone who looked at the wreckage he'd caused and tried to rebuild instead of walking away. Small moments between us started to shift. He brought me coffee in bed, 2 creams, 1 sugar, exactly how I liked it. I didn't ask how he knew. He'd been paying attention. I started sitting with him while he worked in the evenings, reading my book while he handled calls. Our fingers would brush reaching for the same wine glass. Neither of us pulled away. After a particularly brutal meeting where a father refused to even let Dante speak, I found him on the balcony at 11:34 p.m., shoulders hunched against the October wind. I brought him tea, sat beside him,
Didn't speak.
Finally, "I can't fix it," he said, his voice rough. "Everything I've broken. There's not enough money or time or, you can't fix the past," I agreed. "But you can build a better future." He looked at me, and in the city lights reflecting in his eyes, I saw the man I'd fallen for.
Flawed.
Dangerous.
Trying.
"Do I deserve that?" he asked quietly. "Do I deserve you?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know you're trying, and that matters." His hand found mine, tentative, giving me room to pull away. I didn't. I laced my fingers through his and held on. "I love you," he whispered into the night air, like a confession. "I know I have no right to say that. I know I don't deserve you. But I love you so fucking much it terrifies me." My heart cracked open, all the walls I'd rebuilt crumbling. "I love you too," I whispered back. "I don't want to. It's probably the stupidest thing I've ever done.
But I love you, Dante. Not the version of you that you think you should be. The real you.
All of it." He turned to me, his free hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing away tears. I didn't know I was crying. "Stay," he said. "After the 6 months. Stay with me. Really. Not because of a contract or money or anything else. Just stay. Are you sure? Your world is dangerous." "I'm not. You're everything." His voice was fierce, certain. "Everything I didn't know I needed. Everything I don't deserve but can't live without." I searched his eyes for any sign of manipulation, of the game player he'd been. But all I saw was naked vulnerability, desperate hope, and love so intense it took my breath away. "Yes," I said. "I'll stay." He kissed me then, soft and reverent, like I was something precious instead of a transaction. Like I was chosen not because I was convenient, but because I was irreplaceable. When he lifted me into his arms and carried me inside, I wrapped my legs around his waist and let myself believe that broken things could be mended. That monsters could become men. That love could grow from the darkest soil. What happened next changed everything. The contract expired on a Wednesday. We celebrated with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine from the corner store, $11.99, the kind that came with a screw cap. We sat on the kitchen floor because I insisted it felt more real than his $15,000 dining table. "This is ridiculous," Dante said, but he was smiling as he opened containers of lo mein and General Tso's chicken. "This is perfect," I corrected, stealing a piece of broccoli from his container. He fed me lo mein directly from the carton, and when I laughed at the absurdity of it, he looked at me like I'd hung the stars. "I have something for you," he said, setting down the food. "If it's another check." "It's not." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. When had he gotten that? And my heart stopped. "Petra, we're already married." But it wasn't real. It was a contract and a game, and the worst thing I've ever done. "So, I want to ask you properly." He opened the box. Inside was a ring that stole my breath. Sapphires the color of midnight surrounded by tiny diamonds, delicate and intricate and so beautiful it made my chest ache. "I want to marry you again," Dante said, his voice soft.
"For real this time?"
"With your brother there and Gabby and everyone who matters."
"I want to say the vows and mean them."
I want to give you the wedding you deserve, where you're not a transaction, but the woman I love more than my own life. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Dante. I want to spend every day earning the privilege of being your husband. I want to wake up next to you for the next 50 years and still feel like the luckiest bastard alive. His voice broke. I just want you, forever. Really? That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, I whispered. Is that a yes? You idiot. I was crying and laughing at the same time. Of course it's a yes. Yes, I'll marry you again. Yes to everything. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly because of course it did, because he paid attention to every detail about me. Then he kissed me, tasting like cheap wine, and forever. I have something to tell you too, I said when we finally came up for air. He tensed slightly. Should I be worried? I'm pregnant. Dante went completely still. What? 2 months. I found out last week. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you, and I guess sitting on the kitchen floor eating Chinese food is as good as any. His hands were shaking as he cupped my face, his eyes searching mine. You're serious? You're pregnant. We're having a baby.
Yes.
Are you? Is this okay? Okay. His voice cracked completely. Petra, I never thought I'd get this. A family. Real love. A future that isn't built on blood and violence. You have it now, I said, pressing my hand over his where it rested against my cheek. All of it. We're building it together. He kissed me again, and I tasted salt from tears I wasn't sure were his or mine or both. When he pulled me into his lap, holding me like I might disappear, I felt his whole body shaking. I'm going to be a father, he whispered against my hair. A good one. I know you will. How do you know? Because you fight for the people you love. And you're going to love this baby with everything you have. We stayed on the kitchen floor for another hour, making plans and stealing kisses and letting cheap wine and cheaper takeout be the foundation of our new beginning. 3 months later, winter sun streamed through stained glass windows in a small chapel on the north side. I wore ivory lace, a dress Alexei had helped me pick out, his eyes bright with health and happiness because his latest scans showed continued remission. He walked me down the aisle, both of us crying before we'd made it halfway. Dante stood at the altar in a suit that probably cost more than most cars, but his hands trembled when I reached him. Gabby stood beside me as maid of honor, grinning like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. A handful of family and friends filled the pews, small and intimate and real. The priest began, but I barely heard him. I was too focused on Dante's face, on the love and wonder and naked vulnerability in his eyes. When it came time for vows, Dante spoke first. I promise to choose you every day, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. To protect you and our family. To be transparent and honest even when it's hard. To be worthy of the love you've given me. To earn, every single day, the privilege of being your husband. My turn. I was crying before I started. I promise to see you, I said. All of you. The darkness and the light. The monster and the man. The ruthless and the gentle. I promise to love every part of you, to challenge you when you need it, and to stand beside you through everything. You're mine, Dante Russo. And I'm yours. Forever. You may kiss your bride. Dante pulled me close, his hand cradling the small bump barely visible under my dress. Mine, he whispered against my lips. Ours, I corrected. This is ours. All of it. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. The reception was small but joyful. Gabby gave a toast that had everyone crying and laughing. Alexei threatened Dante with creative violence if he ever hurt me, and Dante swore on our baby's life that he wouldn't. We danced to a slow Italian song Dante's mother had loved, and I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Do you ever regret it? I asked quietly. How we started. Every day, he admitted. But I can't regret where we ended up. We haven't ended up anywhere yet. We're just beginning. He spun me slowly, his hand protective over our child. Then I can't wait to see where we go. 6 months later, on a Tuesday that smelled like spring rain and new beginnings, I gave birth to a daughter with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. Dante held her for the first time and wept. This man who'd built an empire on fear and blood, completely undone by 7 pounds and 4 ounces of love. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice wrecked. "She's ours," I said from the hospital bed, exhausted and happy. "What should we name her?" "I've been thinking about this for months." "Hope. We'll name her Hope." He looked at me, understanding immediately. Hope for the future we were building. Hope that darkness could become light. Hope that broken things could be mended. "Hope," he repeated, pressing a kiss to her tiny forehead. "It's perfect." Watching him hold our daughter, seeing the way he looked at her like she was a miracle, I knew we'd made it. Through manipulation and betrayal, through pain and forgiveness, through all of it, we'd made it to the other side. Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask questions, she climbed into my lap and said, "Mommy, how did you and Daddy meet?" Dante and I shared a look across the living room, a whole conversation in a glance. "Well, sweetheart," I said, "it started with a bet." "The best bet I ever made," Dante added, crossing to sit beside us. I poked his chest. "And the last one." He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "The last one," he agreed, "because I already won everything that matters." Hope didn't understand the darkness underneath that fairy tale. Didn't know about the folder or the manipulation or the nights I'd cried in a locked bedroom. She just saw her parents, imperfect, real, deeply in love. And maybe that was enough. Some love stories start with lightning. Ours started with a lie. But it became the truest thing either of us had ever known. Because I'd looked at a monster and seen a man underneath. Because he'd looked at himself through my eyes and decided to become someone worthy of that vision. Because love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other, again and again, despite the darkness. Dante pulled me closer, Hope giggling between us, and I felt the weight of the ring on my finger. Not the gold band from the courthouse, but the sapphires and diamonds he'd chosen because he knew me, really knew me. "I love you," he murmured against my hair. "I love you too," I whispered back. Monster and all. Forever. Forever. And in that moment, surrounded by the family we'd built from broken pieces and second chances, I knew that some bets were worth taking. Some monsters were worth loving. And some love stories, even the ones that started in darkness, could find their way to light. If this story consumed you the way it consumed me, subscribe to Rosalie's Dark Romance for more dangerously addictive tales. Comment below where you're watching from, and tell me, do you believe monsters can change? Do you believe love can grow from manipulation and betrayal? I need to know what you think. Drop "I'm with you, Rosalie" in the comments if you stayed until the end. Your presence means everything. Until next time, remember, the most dangerous love is the one that transforms you completely. This is Rosalie, signing off. Stay addicted to the darkness.